Walking with Bartram. Appletree Campground to Piercy Creek. From 1970 to 1976, groups in the 8 southern states that William Bartram traveled through came together and established the Bartram Trail Conference. This group was hoping to create a federally designated Bartram Trail.
The North Carolina Bartram Trail Society, the Georgia Bartram Trail Society, and the Bartram Trail Conference were all forming around the same time, which was around the bicentennial.
Sure. Walter McKelvey was a New Englander who was a landscaper and had moved to Brevard. When he got there, he met some friends and they started talking about what can we do for the bicentennial. I was in my office and all of a sudden Walter knocks on my door and says, "Would you be interested in joining us with the Bartram Trail?" And I said, "Well, certainly." The Bartram Trail Society actually began with Grady Bell in Georgia. And we joined them initially. The problem was they were meeting more or less weekly or bi-weekly down in Georgia. And when McKelvey and I got to talking about it, we decided it was too far to drive for regular meetings and told them that maybe we should split and become the North Carolina Bartram Trail Society. The location of the trail started with McKelvey's work with the North Carolina Forest Service in Nashville. And he began to put together a proposal for the North Carolina Bartram Trail locations. Raul Bossi was known as the Brevard historian. Some of the other members that were interested in the effort began to work with Bossi on putting together the history for Bartram's hike through the region. And so they just started with the maps, and I guess the combination resulted in, well, the corridor for the trail. And by 75, Walter was ill. He was not telling us, but he had cancer and had died. And his wife, Helen McKelvey, invited us over, and we organized officially for the North Carolina Bartram Trail Society.
The years that Dan has already talked about were all work going into deciding where this trail was to go. But when you go to establish a trail, you have to work with the Forest Service. You have to have the trail on a terrain that, for instance, you can build trail on. There are sections that we bypassed that were so rugged or steep or like a cliff that you couldn't put a trail there, so we had to go some other route. Now, when you go that other route, are you getting into an area that the Forest Service plans to log in the future? Because National Forest is multiple use. Are you crossing an archaeological site, whether a Pioneer or Cherokee, that they don't want disturbed? Dan here had a big hand in determining about rare plants. Well, we don't want to dig a trail right through the middle of a bed of something that's only found there. And then the trail has to be on a certain grade. They like to hold it to 12%. And something that's easier to maintain, the less steep the trail, the easier it is to keep erosion from happening and that sort of thing. And then you have to decide on the actual route and then get together to build it. So before a single tool goes in the ground, and this is a Pulaski, this is what builds trails, this is what built the Bartram Trail, this instrument right here, which will wear you out in a short while if you're old or young. Before that goes into the ground one time, you have all of this to do. Originally, the route was foreseen to go all the way through western North Carolina and then on through past Andrews and Murphy on that mountain range, all the way over to the Tennessee border at Unicoi Gap, and meet up with another trail that was in the works called the Benton-MacKaye Trail. The westward extension was another many miles and getting increasingly far for us to go to work. Very difficult land and with some unfriendly landowners.
Many of our members that were walking the trail are faced with a guy coming out with a shotgun and saying, "You're not going to go through here," as if he owned that road, which he didn't at the time.
I suggested we call that the western extension of the North Carolina Bartram Trail, and there's work been done on it, but we do something that's closer and that we can actually accomplish as a group. And that was to build what we called Section 7 at the time, and that's Beechertown up to the top of Cheoah Bald. And I said, Bartram never made it to the Overhill, which is on the other side of the Smokies, but from Cheoah Bald, he could have looked that direction. You can see to the Overhill. The board decided and the society voted to have the trail officially end on top of Cheoah Bald, where it meets the Appalachian Trail and is the grandstand of the Atlantic. I mean, that's a description of what you see from Cheoah Bald. You're really talking about from the mid-70s until mid-90s before the route was really established that we could do. It only takes a piece of private property that wide to stop a major project years in the making if the person doesn't want you to cross. So at the end of the Fishhawk Mountain section, we came down to Buckeye Creek, but that was never our preferred route. Now we hike the preferred route, and you've hiked that coming right out down the Hickory Knoll Road, but there were two pieces of private property there that were in the way. One was this weird piece that separated two large pieces of national forest. One came down very close to the road, and then that major piece that goes all the way across the mountain range. It was this weird piece of private property. So we didn't know who owned it. We decided, well, maybe this owner will let us cross and there won't be any problem. So Richard Melvin, a lawyer who was in the club and also an historian and liked going through deeds and all, he and I went over to the Macon County Courthouse and started going through their old court deed books. And it was in deed book number 1. I don't know if it was the first page or not, but it turned out that particular property was owned by Nimrod Jarrett, who was a land speculator and a large landowner. That was one of his many pieces. He had thousands of acres, and he bought it in the 1830s.
This ancient road culvert is located on another piece of property once owned by Nimrod Jarrett. Appletree Campground, where we started this hike, is where he lived from 1855 until his death.
And he was a wealthy man. He was murdered in the 1870s, so his land was divided up. This little piece just seemed to have been forgotten. We don't know why, but nobody claimed it. Nobody owned it. Nobody paid taxes on it. It was the 12 acres that nobody knew. And so Richard Melvin very quickly saw that we could put a quitclaim on it. I could do it as a private individual. And if you actually hold land like that is not claimed or in a title, and hold it and improve it for a certain number of years, and also have public announcements in the newspapers and all that you're doing this, that land over a certain period of time becomes that quitclaimers.
7 years.
7 years. So I did that. I put a quitclaim on it, and then I turned right around and sold it to the Bartram Trail Society for $1. And we developed it, putting the trail through, and put new ads in the newspaper. We did everything legal, and at the end of 7 years, it officially became totally the North Carolina Bartram Trail Society's land. And then eventually they sold it to the Forest Service. That was about 10 or 12 acres. Then there was this other little piece right down between the National Forest and Hickory Knoll Road. There's a lot of steps there now that came up for sale. Well, land was hot in Macon County at the time, and it was selling like crazy. This was in the, I can't remember exactly when it was, late 1990s. I called all the members of the Bartram Trail Society. I was president at the time, Dan and others, Speed, Mo Wheelers, other people, and said, if we buy this, will you get the society to pay us back over time? And they said, yes, we'll do it. We'll do it. So Becky and I bought the land, and we turned around and sold it to the Bartram Trail Society, I think for $1. And within a few years, we were paid back. So now, Buckeye Creek is a secondary route, and the preferred route is out and down to the trailhead there at Hickory Knoll Road.
This gives us a complete ownership of the trail through the Fishhawk Mountains.
The trail was completed about then. How did that roughly 5-mile extension of the trail happen? Well, it happened over a period of probably close to 20 years. Then the trail had to be built. Dan did a lot of scouting on that trail. Tim Warren, whom I mentioned earlier, very important. into getting all this done. Keith Day, Section 2, the Fishhawk Mountains, there's Keith Day Knob. We named it Keith Day Knob and put it on the map. And he did so much work there.
Tim also served as the president for the Bartram Trail group for several years, but his main interest was to get out and dig trail. He essentially was the maintainer, and I believe that was for a decade or more.
Not just building trail, but rebuilding when it erodes or is bad shape. Tim and people like Tim have worked as volunteers for thousands of hours. It's all unseen, but that's what brought the trail into being and keeps it going today with other people.
In October of 1997, the entire Bartram Trail in Georgia and North Carolina was designated a National Recreation Trail.
And I remember carrying that trail sign out to Jones Gap, that area on the Section 2, and we put it in the ground and planted it and then posed around that sign.
In 2019, the North Carolina Bartram Trail Society adopted the 37 miles of trail in Georgia. And by February of 2021, the group was renamed the Blue Ridge Bartram Trail Conservancy. The actual Bartram Trail continues to evolve as well. A reroute through downtown Franklin, North Carolina is complete, and another proposed route over Tremont Ridge is in the works. This will eliminate most of the road walking. Join us next time for the 14th section of our hike, Beechertown to Piercy Creek. Connect with us on YouTube and Facebook. If you enjoyed this, click the thumbs up and follow us to see the next episode.
So here's what the original maps of the entire trail looked like. We divided it into 7 sections. I've got 6 here. I don't know where number 7 is. But anyway, here's trail number 7, Section 7, the Beechertown Trail. And that's how we originally did the map, in 7 sections. And so and each section's about a day's hike.